Today we're going fabric shopping. Fabric shopping. Fabric shopping. Yeah! Alright, so this is part one of like a two-part series to fabric shopping. Part one is planning out what you need before you go to the store. So generally I try to know 3 things before I even head out to the store. One is a general kind of idea, maybe, of what fabric I'm gonna use. It doesn't have to be set in stone. I might find something in the store that completely changes my mind and I'm gonna go a different route, but I kind of like to plan out things ahead of time first so I have a general idea of what I'm looking for when I get there. 2, I try to keep in mind my budget. And 3, I try to keep in mind the amounts of the fabric that I'm gonna be looking for. So about knowing what kind of fabrics you want, this is gonna depend per character, per what you want, the look you wanna go for. If you wanna go something classic, you wanna make it fancier, this is gonna be your decision. So really quick, I will walk you through kind of how I plan out what to choose for my fabrics and my kind of thought process. Maybe that will help you out, but it is gonna be different for everybody. So for this part, you're just gonna need a picture of the character that you want to cosplay. It can be a photo reference, it could be a TV screenshot, or it could be like a drawing, it could be whatever you want, just something to break down what you're gonna need to buy. So for the character I am shopping for today, it is an original design of mine, so I am going to be going off of an illustration. So since this is an original design of mine, this is my croquis, which is just a basic fashion illustration. I have it in my notebook. And then I use tracing paper to build my layers on top of my original illustration. Really quick, just as I know someone's gonna ask, I just use basic sketchbooks. I use colored pencils to color it in, and then I use Prismacolor markers to just outline the generic shapes and make sure I can see like my seam lines or my zippers or anything that I put in my illustration. I use markers to highlight it. And then to break down what I'm gonna need, I use sticky notes and a pen. Alright, so I pretty much just start breaking it down by body part in a way. Like I'm gonna need boot covers, leggings, pretty much a bodysuit, and some gloves. So in my head, I think I want like a pleathery looking material. I already know by my coloring that I want it to be like a reddish brown. I think I'll need around 5/8 of a yard. That's being very generous. So I might eyeball it at the fabric store and think I need less, but I always try to estimate for more. And then I'm gonna need this string that I'm gonna be having detailing down the entire edge of the boot. So I pretty much just repeat this process for every item of the costume. And then for the bodysuit, just noting to myself, it is 3 different colors. I'm gonna want 3 different fabrics. There is a zipper closure right here, which I marked with my marker. I do need some Velcro to attach the neck open so I can get it on and off. I'm kind of thinking I'm gonna want it to be spandex. I don't know right now if I want it to match my socks or I want them to be different fabrics. I'm still keeping that idea open. And then I'm gonna need some 1/4" elastic to put into the thighs to keep them in place. And if you can't decide on what fabric is gonna be best or what kind of closures you're gonna need for the garment, go ahead and reference back on your pattern. So on your pattern, it will say designed for 2-way stretch and 4-way stretch fabrics. That means you're gonna want something that stretches. Suggested fabrics: spandex, metallic spandex, rubberized spandex, moleskin, synthetic leather. So that's what it suggests. You can definitely do more options than what it lists, but these are gonna be the ones that work best for this design. Here, this chart is the measurements for what amounts of fabric you're gonna need for your size. Below that, it says notions. All right, and so that is it. That is how I plan out what fabrics and what notions I'm gonna possibly need before I go to the store. And again, if you are recreating an actual costume from a TV show, movie, manga, whatever, you can just use an actual image of the character and do the same process. The second part of budget is going to be all on you. So everyone has different allowances of what they're willing to spend on fabric and on notions, so you kind of just have to work that through yourself. But using the fabrics you think you're gonna want from step 1, you can kind of factor that into your budget. If you're gonna be using silks and leathers and faux leathers and vinyl, then yeah, it's gonna be more expensive. So you might wanna keep that in mind. You're gonna be having a bigger budget for this costume. But if you're using like simple cotton polys or rayons, then you're only gonna be spending $5 to $6 a yard, and you're gonna be able to have a smaller budget. So to do that, the easiest thing to do is to reference your pattern. And maybe you won't have the specific pattern you want to use at home. You might be going to the fabric store to also buy a pattern, But if you do need to do that, buy your pattern first, or I mean, look through the patterns first. That way you have it with you and you can reference the guides on the back to know how much fabric you're gonna need. So yes, this is going to be the pattern I am going to be using for the most part. I am going to be altering it slightly to fit my design, but this is going to be generically good enough to tell me how much fabric I'm going to need to buy. All right, step 3 was about knowing how much fabric you're gonna need before you get there. This also factors into like the budget thing. If you need 6 yards of fabric, let's hope it's a cheaper fabric. You don't want to have 6 yards of a leather fur and it's like $18 a yard, but it doesn't matter. I don't know what your costumes are. Maybe you're gonna need 6 yards of a $20 fabric. Factor that into your budget. But it's good to know how much yardage of fabric you're gonna need before you get to the store. You have to figure out your size. I know I'm between an 8 and a 10. I use somewhere in between there. Usually I go for a 10 just to give me some extra. 1 5/8 of my main fabric, which is going to be for the pants and the side layers of the top. And then the contrast for D is going to be 1 1/8 yard. So right there I'm looking at 3 yards total, which is a very little amount of fabric. I'm not really concerned about it in my budget at all, but at least I know going in how much I'm going to be getting and how much I'm going to be spending. So that's about it. That's as far as my planning process goes before I go to the fabric store. And like I said, sometimes I walk into the store and I completely change my mind. I find a fabric I fall in love with and sometimes I want to use more of it, or it changes the type of fabric I want, or sometimes it changes my design slightly. I want to add something or take something away. Anything could happen when you're at the fabric store, but at least now you have a subtle grasp of what you're gonna want ahead of time. All right, so that's it for this pre-fabric store shopping video. This was part 1. Make sure you look for part 2 where we actually go shopping at the fabric store. So thank you all so much for watching. Don't forget to like, favorite, and subscribe to my channel, and I will see you next time. Bye. You seem suspiciously quiet right now. I just told my friend that I got her a 3-day ticket to WonderCon. WonderCon, not Comic-Con, and she's stoked. Oh my gosh, this is just minutes of nothing.